Yo, what's going on, guys? Mush back at it with another video. We are just 2 days away from the release of Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. I think one of, if not the most anticipated game of 2019 thus far. And it's not like 2019 has been empty of big game releases. We've had games like Resident Evil 2, we've had Devil May Cry 5, dare I say we've had Anthem. I mean, there was some anticipation going into the release of that game, Kingdom Hearts 3 on the console side of things. But I think Sekiro Shadows Die Twice is on another level, and in today's video, I want to go over how hard this game is to run. The system requirements are out right now, want to give you guys some insight on that. And after I go over the system requirements, honestly, this video is more of an excuse for me to gush about how excited I am for this game, how excited I am for the PC release. And even though I always come across these videos talking about how I think it's not worth spending full price on any game these days, at least the majority of games, Sekiro Shadows Die Twice is one game that I will be dropping. Not even my $60 on Green Man Gaming actually has it a little bit cheaper, but you get the idea. I will be paying a hefty price for Sekiro Shadows Die Twice, and I'm gonna be doing it because it's from Software, and I know this game is gonna be tremendous, but we can gush about that game after we talk the system requirements. So we'll kick things off with the minimum system requirements. You're looking at an Intel Core i3 2100 or an AMD FX 6300. To give you guys an idea of how low-end the CPU requirement is, if you look up my early PC builds that I was doing, back in 2013, 2014, around that time, a lot of them featured an FX 6300. And the fact that we're in 2019 and one of the more anticipated games of the year, one of the higher-end games you would think, is still listing an FX 6300 as a minimum CPU, that's pretty awesome. An Intel Core i3 2100 on the other hand is a Sandy Bridge series CPU, and again, it's pretty low end. Sandy Bridge is pretty old at this point, although it's not like Intel CPUs have made these massive gains since Sandy Bridge. There's definitely been gains made, but if you look at the time frame since Sandy Bridge has been released, you would imagine more gains have been made, and actually the recommended CPU is a Sandy Bridge CPU as well. We'll get to that in a little bit, but I found that a little bit funny. As far as minimum CPU goes, that's very, very modest, and if you have something like a more recent Ryzen, if you have something like a more recent i5, you are going to be absolutely fine. And that's even indicative in the recommended CPU requirements, but again, we'll get to that in a little bit. Minimum RAM requirement, you're looking at 4 GB of RAM, so super easy for that. A lot of games these days, especially in 2019, you're seeing more and more games list 8 GB of RAM as a minimum requirement, but with this game, it is going to be 4 GB minimum, so that's pretty great. I mean, I recommend anyone that's building a PC in 2019 to get 8 GB of RAM, but for whatever reason, if you have an older PC, if you're still rocking 4 GB of RAM, as long as everything else is up to par, it looks like you're going to be just fine. GPU, again, pretty low end here, although it is a little bit tricky as the minimum GPU requirement is the NVIDIA GeForce GTX 760. That's for the NVIDIA side of things. That's pretty modest as well. That's an older GPU. And at this point, even if you look at GPUs like the GTX 1050, that outpaces the 760 quite a bit. And if you look at more recent, like RX 570s, 580s, way ahead of the 760. But speaking of AMD, the AMD GPU is a little bit odd as it does list the minimum GPU as an AMD Radeon HD 7950. Now, recollection serves me correctly, I believe the 7950 is considerably more powerful than the GTX 760, and it gets a little bit more odd when we look at the recommended GPU. The only thing that I don't like about this is I don't really like them using older iteration of GPUs. Like at this point in 2019, a lot of you guys probably don't even remember what the GTX 760 is. A lot of you guys probably don't remember what the HD 7950 is, and obviously it's evident that AMD has moved away from the HD series GPUs because they've totally rebranded their GPUs. Of course, now they release the RX GPU, so I just don't understand why are you still listing these old GPUs, these archaic GPUs. Modernize it a little bit just so it's easier to digest for the consumer, but hey, I've been complaining about this for seemingly years and nothing has been done about it. At least with some games, a lot of publishers have made system requirements a lot easier to digest, but with some other games, for example Sekiro, they make it a little bit more difficult on the gamer. But that wraps up all of the minimum system requirements. Let's move on to the recommended system requirements. Recommended CPU, Intel Core i5 2500K, that is the Sandy Bridge i5. The 2500K is literally one of the most iconic CPUs of all time. I remember back when I was really getting into PC gaming, this was the CPU everybody was going for. If you're building a mid-range to a high-end build, the i5 2500K was obscene. For its performance per dollar, it was just absolutely crazy, and they're still recommending it today in 2019 for a game like Sekiro. That's pretty impressive. AMD, you're looking at a Ryzen 5 1400, so again, not too bad at all there. Kind of odd again, they list a very old Intel CPU as the recommended CPU, but for the AMD side of things, they do modernize it a little bit. I just wish there was a little bit of parity across the board. List a modern Intel CPU, list a modern AMD CPU, but again, that's just me complaining about the little things. Recommended RAM, you are looking at 8GB of RAM, so again, a lot of games these days are going with 8GB of minimum and then like 12 or 16 as recommended. It just seems like Sekiro is a lower end game in terms of the hardware that you're going to need to run it. I mean, that's evident through all of the other system requirements as well. So cool to see us going back in time a little bit and having minimum as 4GB and recommended as 8GB. For recommended GPU, now this is a little weird. It was weird with the minimum GPU. Recommended GPU, you're looking at an NVIDIA GeForce GTX 970, one of the most controversial GPU of all time. I'm sure some of you guys are aware about the 3.5GB stuff that happened with the 970 way back in the day, but a very good GPU and a very popular GPU when it was released, just like every other 70 series card. They always resonate very strongly with gamers. And then on the AMD side of things, you're looking at an RX 570. Again, I think in this case, they're a little bit more comparable, but they are generations apart. On the AMD side of things, you've got a modernized GPU with the RX 570. NVIDIA, they're listing a GPU a couple generations old. So the 970 is comparable to the 1060 to an extent. Obviously, if you have something like a 1660, that outpaces the 970 quite a bit. I don't think that's anything too crazy. A 970 at this point is an older GPU. I believe that released all the way back in 2014. So you're talking about a near 5-year-old GPU still being recommended for a game of Sekiro's caliber. I think that's quite nice. And I imagine a GPU like a 970 would give you some high quality 1080p performance. However, if you are looking to go to 1440p or 4K, I imagine that you would need something of considerably higher end, but that is just speculation on my part. However, just given the fact of how From Software has done their system requirements in the past, usually recommended does point towards high quality 1080p performance. If you want to go above that, you are probably going to need higher end hardware. And lastly, I do want to note that they do tout 25GB of available storage space for you to download the game. So those are the entirety of the system requirements. Sekiro Shadows Die Twice is out this Friday. Now, outside of the system requirements, I just really want to gush about my excitement of the game. From Software has been one of those studios that I've really gotten behind over the last few years. Of course, most of you guys know them for the Souls franchise, but they've done a couple of other games. But if you keep it completely concise to Souls, man, they have taken Demon Souls, which I don't think a lot of people were expecting to really resonate over here in the West, and Dark Souls has become one of the most popular franchises in all of gaming. That's for a lot of reasons. It's quality, it's challenge, just the style of game that it is. It makes for a great game to watch streamers play, and I think that's just inherently helped the promotion of the game. But for me, it's one of the most engaging games that I've come across, and From Software could have stuck with Souls easily. They could have done Bloodborne 2, and while they are sticking to the third-person challenging action-adventure title, Sekiro Shadows Die Twice is definitely a lot different than Souls at the same time. I don't want to go over all of the gameplay nuance changes, but there's definitely a lot of differences being included in the game, especially when you look at it from a level design standpoint. Verticality and traversal is something that they've changed a lot in Sekiro, and I think as far as gameplay is concerned, that's going to allow for a lot of variety in how you actually play the game. But in terms of challenge, of course, that's something From Software has been synonymous with. Hidetaka Miyazaki went as far as to say that Sekiro Shadows Die Twice is From Software's most challenging game that they've created thus far, which says a lot. If you're honestly talking about it from a difficulty standpoint, if you played games back in the day, it's not like Souls games are these punishingly difficult games. Yes, are they a little bit more challenging than your average action-adventure title? Sure, but the average action-adventure title in 2019 is rather easy, so it's not like that's saying much. Souls is challenging, but it's also very rewarding at the same time, and if you want to compare Souls to some of the games back in the day, like say on the NES or the Super Nintendo, of course it's a completely different style of game, but if you're judging it just based on challenge, it is a little bit easier. But I think the quality of Souls and the quality of From Software's game development extends far beyond just challenge. It's the rewarding gameplay, the incredible presentation. I mean, I go back to a game like Bloodborne, that game's presentation was just so incredible from an atmosphere standpoint, the visuals, the music, the design. That game was just top-notch from a presentation standpoint, and based on what I'm seeing from Sekiro, even if the system requirements aren't pointing towards this game being an absolute technical juggernaut, and based on what I'm seeing in the game, again, I think visually it looks really good, but from a presentation standpoint and those little nuances and details, I think they're doing the setting a lot of justice, and of course the setting is a big talking point of the game as well. 1500 Sengoku Japan, it's a setting that I would love to see gaming explore a little bit more. I've always wanted to see an Assassin's Creed game around this time period, but unfortunately we haven't gotten that yet. Thankfully, Sekiro will be exploring it a little bit, so that kind of concludes my spiel on the game. Again, I don't advocate dropping $60 or even, $50 on a lot of games, but Sekiro is one game that I think is going to be well worth the full price of admission. And with a From Software standpoint, if you remember how Dark Souls 1 turned out on PC, yeah, if that's the only experience of a From Software game you have on PC, you would be a little hesitant with this game. But Dark Souls 2 and Dark Souls 3, especially with DS3. That game turned out to be rather good on PC, so I expect something similar out of Sekiro. The only point of contention is that this game is being published by Activision, but it really seems like Activision left From Software to their own devices to create a compelling game. And I think that's what we're gonna get come Friday. So that's gonna conclude this video. Definitely want to hear your guys' thoughts. I'm super excited for Sekiro. As a fan of the From Software titles, I think it's very easy to get excited for the game, and one game that I do think is gonna be worth the full price of admission. Let me know all of your thoughts in the comment section down below. Are you as excited for Sekiro as I am? Are you surprised by the system requirements that they're rather tame? And if you guys have a request for a future video, of course, you can always leave that in the comment section down below, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace out. Hey, what's going on, guys? Mush here again. Hope you enjoyed the video. As you guys might know, YouTube's notification system is sometimes a little bit wonky, even if you're subscribed to the channel. Maybe you're not abundantly aware that I uploaded a video. To remedy that situation, make sure you hit the bell notification button. This way, whenever I upload a new video, and I try to upload as consistently as possible, you will be notified directly of the upload, and you can watch it as soon as it goes live. I would really appreciate if you guys hit that button so you can stay up to date with all of the content I'm posting. But as always, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace out.